As a reminder, and always, we want to try and ground our conversations and our thinking, our decision-making, and our core values. While all of these, I would say, all of these core values are at play as we talk about this issue, this matter, this concern, there are a few that I'd call out in particular. One about excellence and our need to continually strive for excellence. For us as educators and those working on behalf of children and families, of course for our children, our scholars, for all of us. Also the core value of a growth mindset, which calls on us and challenges us to believe that our children can achieve, that they can grow, that they can attain at really high levels, that they have the capacity to do so, and that we as educators have the capacity to get our scholars there. And so that growth mindset, I believe, is really important as we consider this matter. And then lastly, positive and respectful culture. It's really important that we create a culture and maintain a culture within our schools, our classrooms, and across our district and our community that encourages people to be their best selves, rewards folks for being their best selves, and frankly and unfortunately at times that addresses when we don't present our best selves. So just wanted to call out those three in particular. So again, just in the way of context and background, board members, we were contacted on Monday, August the 14th, which now seems like several months ago. But on the 14th of testing irregularities, we were contacted by and informed by the Mississippi Department of Education, and those testing irregularities occurred during the spring administration of the MAP assessment, the state assessment. Through the data that was shared with us, it was indicated that there were 4 schools that had more targeted and individual abnormalities by a particular classroom or a particular subject or some students in a particular subject, and then that there were 3 other schools where there were more significant irregularities flagged. We were directed at that time by the Mississippi Department of Education to conduct an internal investigation and to submit a report to the Mississippi Department of Education by or before September 6th of our findings in that investigation. And so we immediately developed a plan and enlisted some of our senior leaders in the district, as well as some retirees who served as administrators and hearing officers and other positions for us, to serve on that investigation team, just trying to pull in folks who have the background and experiences to kind of help us see what needs to be seen and make sense of it as we were going through the investigative process. Just want to round all of the issues that we've been investigating in not only state policies or statutes, but also our JPS policy GBA, which is a staff ethics policy. And the first section here deals directly with operating truthfully as it relates to any investigation that's being conducted, and participating in that truthfully and with honesty. And the second section speaks to falsification or altering or making false statements or misrepresenting information regarding scholar records or testing, grades, report cards, test data, test scores, any of that sort of thing. As well, the Mississippi Educator Code of Ethics 9.2b, which speaks to violating confidentiality agreements and specifically around testing items and distributing those, publishing those, discussing those items, or in other ways violating state directions around the use of tests. And so what were our expectations of our investigative team? We asked them to conduct interviews of scholars and staff and to record those responses. There were a number of us, or a few of us on the executive team, who actually conducted the interviews of our principals in the affected schools, impacted schools, as well as our district test coordinator, and did the same, recorded those responses. We followed a script of questions that were developed for the various roles for our scholars, for our teachers, for our administrators, just depending on their role. And we followed those, but then we probed as appropriate, as needed, to try and get as much understanding of what was said or what was meant or any of that sort of thing. We summarized those findings, and we asked the team to summarize those findings and provide their reports, their summaries, to the Deputy Superintendent and General Counsel, who really took the lead on gathering that information, trying to make sense of it, and developing the report to be submitted to the Mississippi Department of Education. The investigative team was also asked to suggest any follow-up interviews. So we had a first round of interviews of all of the folks that we thought would be able to shed some light on what did or didn't happen. And then there were some follow-up interviews that were suggested as a result of what they heard or saw or didn't hear or didn't see in the first round. Obviously, we needed and expected them to maintain confidentiality and discretion. We actually had individuals to sign confidentiality agreements. And then we also asked the test coordinator to compare the testing plans. Each school develops its own testing plan with seating charts and schedules and all sorts of things for how they will engage in the state testing program. And we asked the district test coordinator to compare that information with the data provided by MDE Forensics. Before I go on, I should also name that in the interviews, because there were so many scholars across the 7 schools that were implicated, we asked that at least a third of the scholars be randomly selected to respond to the interviews. And so not every student who was flagged in the data from MDE, but at least a third. And so we believe that that was a sufficient number to gain some insights. All right, and so, oops. So the Mississippi School Accountability Standards, that's the, it includes Appendix F, which provides for sort of the language of the types of violations that one might find and that are most problematic in test administration. And so I want to read that language and share that language with you. These are the types of things that, unfortunately, through our investigation, we did find evidence of. And so Standard 16 violations in Section 8, reproducing by any means or disclosing secure test material, including pilot material, and student responses before, during, or after test administration are prohibited. Reproduction or disclosure of secure test materials includes, but is not limited to, the following: reviewing, reading, or looking at secure test material in a manner that is inconsistent with test security regulations and or procedures as outlined in the test administrator's manual. Use of unreleased test items in any form, including rewording of such test items, is strictly prohibited. So that's Section 8. In Section 9, the violations include coaching students, altering responses, or interfering with responses in any way during or after the scheduled test administration is prohibited. Coaching students is defined as providing answers by staff or other students to students in any manner during the test, including cues, clues, hints, and or actual answers in any form, written, printed, verbal, or nonverbal, including but not limited to chalkboards, charts, bulletin boards, posters, computers, hand signals, or allowing students to alter responses after the scheduled test administration. All of that has been laid out in those two sections in particular as violations of the assessment program. And I lifted up that language because this investigation, although we've conducted our internal investigation and we'll share this information with the Mississippi Department of Education for their further consideration and their further review of these matters, there are further or additional actions that the Mississippi Department of Education might take, including reviewing licensure, suspension, revocation of licensure for any of the individuals as they see fit, or perhaps even filing criminal charges as a result of this, because this does constitute a misdemeanor criminal activity. So I'm sharing this information because as we submit, and we did actually this afternoon, as we submitted our report to the Mississippi Department of Education, they then picked this up and continue their piece of this entire process. And so this remains a protected and a confidential process with regard to staff and all of that. And so until they complete their portion of this work and their review of all that data and their determination of any further steps that might need to be taken, we cannot make this report public, unfortunately. As we looked at all of the things that were listed in the previous two slides, those standard 16, section 8 and 9, those violations, and compared that to what we saw and what we heard in terms of behaviors and actions taken by some of our team members, we tried to bucket them based on what we saw and heard. And so in some cases, there were flagrant, we believe, significant violations, or even orchestrating or leading others in taking those violations. In some other cases, they were what we might call lesser offenses, still inappropriate, but not as egregious or as significant as the first bucket. And then we believe that there are, from what we've seen and learned in our investigation, that there were those whose behavior was of concern to us but did not rise to the other levels. And because this is an ongoing process, I won't get into who did what at what schools to identify any of that. But we saw most of what was described in the last two slides. So, given that, there are, well, I'll also name this. And so, given these three buckets, I'll say, of behavior, board members, we have, as of this afternoon, indicated or served notice to 17 team members that they are being terminated, 3 team members that they are being suspended, and there are 24 team members who received letters of reprimand. There are, as you might imagine, with that number of employees implicated in this, there are several implications across those 7 schools. First, at Leicester, because of the staffing implications, our team has been working and is continuing to work with the leadership there to merge classrooms between the visiting Isabel scholars and teachers with Leicester Elementary school classrooms. You'll recall that that Isabel, some of the Isabel scholars are there while their building is being utilized by Jim Hill scholars and team members. And so this provides us an opportunity to absorb some classrooms, combine some classrooms, and still utilize the available staffing there and continue educating our scholars as we need to. At McLeod, we will look at opportunities to collapse classrooms, but we'll also be have already begun reassigning some of our personnel from schools with smaller spaces across the district or smaller enrollment sizes across the district to McLeod. This is, while it's meeting an urgent, imminent, current need, this is not something that's foreign to us. Every year we look at our enrollment and make a determination as to whether there is a need to shift our staff members. And sometimes that happens, many times that happens within a school, but there are times that it also happens across schools where you've got lower enrollment at one school and don't necessarily need the 4 third-grade teachers or the 5 English teachers, middle school teachers, or what have you. And so that's what's happening at McLeod. At Peoples, however, the challenge is much greater. The number of team members implicated here and staffing actions implicated there is such that we cannot continue to operate school at Peoples without making a major shift. And so very shortly, as an information action item, Dr. Cormack will come to you with our recommendation for consolidating Peoples with Whitten Middle School in the Peoples campus, which is in a newer building in far better shape than the Whitten building. Scholar implications. The impacted high school scholars at Lanier may be required by the Mississippi Department of Education to retest on the English 2 exam. Now, this is not all of the high school scholars at Lanier. It is not all of them. But for those impacted by and implicated in this issue, they may be required to retest, as the English 2 exam is required for graduation. And so we'll await the decision and directive from Mississippi Department of Education, but just want to flag that as a potential implication for those scholars. As well, our scholar support plans will be developed for all of the impacted scholars. We are especially mindful of our 3rd graders, but really it's all of our scholars who may have been impacted by the irregularities or the misconduct from this past spring. And so we want to make sure that all of our scholars have the kinds of supports, that we do that proactively, and that we ensure that that they aren't a casualty of the misconduct. And tied to that, this last bullet here, scholars are completing the beginning of year diagnostic exams. We give those every year. We call them universal screeners. We give those every year, and it's an opportunity to see where our scholars are at the beginning of the school year so that our plans for support and instruction and after-school supports and anything else that we might provide to them, that it's based on data, and that we can be as prescriptive and as specific as possible with those supports. And so that will be analyzed against or in comparison to the MAP performance and give us a sense of where there may be some misalignment in the two data sets, and help us determine the appropriate supports for our scholars. As we've been conducting this investigation and just reviewing our practices and thinking about the ways that we can improve test security, there are a few things that have bubbled up for us. The first is, while in high school in particular, it has been the practice that the teachers of that particular subject do not test their own scholars. That's a common practice in our high schools, but not a common practice in our other schools, in our elementary and middle. There's just a lot to be said about scholars being in front of someone that they know and that they're comfortable with as they prepare to take a test, that for some scholars, they go in and there isn't that level of heightened sensitivity and anxiety and all that, but for several others, you know, that could be a really anxious, anxiety-producing time for them. And so we will be working to reset the way that we administer our state assessment so that the homeroom or the teacher who teaches that particular subject is not the one testing their own scholars, but doing so in a way that scholars are aware of and know and have some relationship with those who will be testing them, so that the first time that they encounter those individuals is not at the testing time. And there are ways for us to do that. And so that's one of the major shifts that the team is already working to implement starting this year and going forward. In addition, just as we do at the start of the school year, we will implement a superintendent's hotline for anonymous reporting of any issues. We certainly don't expect there to be future issues of this type, but should there be questions or concerns or anything that just doesn't quite seem or feel right, we want to make sure that individuals know that they've got a place here in the district to contact us and share that information with us in ways that we can act on it and address any concerns that there might be. We also want to make sure that, as should be the case, but that going forward, that we ensure that we collect and consolidate and review all of the test security plans for each and every school, and that information is submitted to the Mississippi Department of Education as directed, as expected, and that if there are any issues early on, those things can be addressed, perhaps even before we get to the testing program. And then lastly, at the impacted schools, we want to ensure that there's enhanced training and monitoring to ensure test security. We fully expect, as we have over the last several years, that we will continue to see progress, that we'll continue to see increased academic achievement of our scholars. And we don't want this incident from this year or this past year to completely sully the work of so many educators and scholars throughout the district. And so we want to be a bit more targeted with the enhanced training and monitoring, even as we implement those other strategies throughout the district. I'll end with this and see what questions you might have for me, board members. As we've reported previously, these are as egregious, as concerning, as serious as these issues are. They are located in 7 of our schools, 4 of which are located in and isolated in a particular grade and or subject. It is not a district-wide issue. And we stand on that. And our data and our investigation have revealed and supported that. At the same time, we're very concerned that this happened anywhere in our district. We believe very strongly in our responsibility to move children to high levels of performance. We believe very strongly in that, and we don't mince words about that. In this district, we will achieve at high levels. But we say that and we believe that while also believing that we have the capacity to do that, and that our scholars have the capacity to achieve at high levels, and that we don't need to cheat. We don't need to skirt the lines or blur the lines or any of that in order to get ahead. And frankly, I really wish we could talk about our other test data that is not implicated in any of this as proof, as absolute proof that so many of our scholars and educators are winning. They are achieving at really high levels and continuing to see that trajectory of growth in this district. And so we've got proof that we don't need to act outside of the guidelines and the requirements in testing. And so I'm really disappointed that some of our folks chose to behave in this way. We believe that we're sending a signal today that we will manage and address misconduct, but I hope that we're also sending a strong signal that for all of those people who do the right thing, have done the right thing, continue to do the right thing as it pertains to serving children, let alone testing, state testing, that we stand behind them and support them.